Welcome in, everybody. Time for another episode of SEC State of Mind presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Taylor Davis, joined, as always, by the man, the myth, the legend, Jason Campbell. And we are so thrilled to welcome in a guest today, a friend of Jason and I's, ESPN analyst, host of Mac and Cube with our friend Cole Kubelik, host of Always College Football Podcast. The guy is in high demand. Every time you turn on a college football show, you're probably going to hear my guy, Greg McElroy. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. It's been a busy football season, and you're fresh off calling a playoff game, but we certainly appreciate you taking some time to chat some SEC ball with us.
No, happy to do it. No, it is busy. Things are starting to slow down a little bit, but it's kind of nice to be at this point where you only have to prep two teams, and we're in a good spot. So glad to be at this point, but the portal's made it tougher. I will admit the timing. It's like you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. I know you guys are covering it too. It's hard to keep up with for sure.
Well, take it from somebody that's involved in the whole portal action, having to be the NIL GM for football at Auburn, trying to help our GM, Andrew Warsaw, who's the GM operations every day. It's wild right now. Like you deal with a lot of things where a kid may want to commit, and then all of a sudden, 24 hours, it can change.
Yeah.
So you just never know. And then the game of football is not how we recognize it, Greg, where you was committed, it's loyalty, it's all these different things, where now there's just so many, like that's out the window. Now it's like any given year, team can be competing for a championship. Now that's the fun part of it, but the biggest part of it is how do you build a football team now in college football?
Yeah.
I think it's really hard. And the thing that I think is amazing, like you look at Indiana, and we've been a bit brainwashed as fans of Southeastern Conference teams and covering the league. And we've been told forever that you got to have a certain caliber of player. You got to have X amount of stars. Your blue chip ratio has to be this to be competitive. When in reality, some of the secret sauce that makes Indiana great is the fact that a lot of those guys were actually under recruited and go into it with a bit of the chip on their shoulder type of mentality, kind of a lunch pail team where maybe they don't have the high octane take over the game, top 10 pick at wide receiver, but they have a bunch of guys that know how to do their job and a scheme that accentuates that. So I think we're at a bit of a crossroads in the sport where the best team right now, whether they win the championship, we'll find out. The best team right now is actually a team that is comprised of a bunch of guys that just want to buy in. They want to be a part of that team, as opposed to a bunch of individuals that maybe don't always have the team as the number one all points bulletin priority. They're kind of more concerned about their draft status or whatever that may be. So I think we're at a weird crossroads right now, and trying to figure out the best formula going forward will not be easy for a lot of teams.
I love that this is kind of how the cards have fallen this year, though, because I think it just adds to the continuous debate, conversation that we're all having about the current landscape of college football. What works? What's a foolproof method? Is there one? And how much does coaching matter? How much does locker room chemistry matter anymore? And I think Indiana is such a great example of this. And what Curt Cignetti done cannot be overemphasized, because I think it is reiterating that some of the foundational pieces that the two of you bought into during your playing days still make an impact, even with all of the changes that have been introduced to college football. So obviously I want to get your take, Greg, on how the playoff has shaken up into this point. Obviously we are less than a week away from crowning a national champion. It's going to be exciting. So let's start with, all right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the game that you just called. And I always tell people this, and they're usually surprised to hear it. Calling a blowout game is way harder than calling a close game. Like, you're just trying to come up with things to say, creative ways to say them when the game gets a little out of hand. And this one was certainly that. I don't know that anyone expected how lopsided this one was going to be and how quickly it got that way. But Indiana, in official broadcast terms, beat the ever-loving crap out of Oregon 56-22. Once again, establishing their dominance that they have been showcasing. They did it to Bama the week before. I had several Alabama fans that were texting me and were like, is it weird that this made me feel a little bit better? But I think that people found some solace. Like, Indiana is that dominant. But you saw it firsthand. what is allowing them to just bulldoze people right now?
Well, they're really, really solid. Like they don't have any weaknesses. I mean, that's the tricky part is that they don't beat themselves. They don't have a lot of weaknesses. You have to earn it against them. And they force a lot of teams to make mistakes. Like it's kind of amazing how many teams make mistakes when they're playing against them. And it's partly because of they have kind of a relentless style where they're very overwhelming. They do a lot of stuff that can cause you to kind of play out of character. And that can be uncomfortable for, I think, a lot of teams. But really, it's kind of as you get down to it, it's so much to do with their style of play, their approach to the play, and teams make uncharacteristic mistakes when they play against them. So they're very good. And if you give them just a little bit, like they take advantage of it. For example, like the Alabama game, it's 4th and 1. Alabama does not have a great play call on 4th and 1. They get stopped. All of a sudden, it goes from 3-0 to 10-0 in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Alabama has a drive going before the half. They fumble the ball on the other side of the 50. I mean, worst case scenario, they go into the half down 10-3. Maybe they get 7. There's time there. So you're sitting there like, all right, Bama's in this game. And then boom, fumble. They grab it. They go down, score with 17 seconds left. Now it's 17-0. Game's over. You know what I mean? It's like they're pretty relentless. And I think with Oregon, very similar. First play of the game, force a bad decision, a bad throw, inside throw on an outbreaking route against outside leverage. They take advantage. It's not just an interception, it's a pick six.
Yep.
They have Dante Moore pull an RPO late. It gets knocked out by the running back because he doesn't slide to his left because he sees presence on the left, and it gets fumbled. They recover it, score. Same thing. Fumble, recover, score. Like it's not like they fumble, go 3 and out, kick a field goal. Like they punish you.
Yeah.
So they're a really good football team, and they have very few weaknesses, and they're very tough to play against.
What's ironic is the early pick six. Katie George, fantastic Katie George, had asked Dan pregame, like, what does it take against these guys? And he literally said before they kicked, you cannot make mistakes against these guys. And then boom, pick six out of the gate. Like, it is top of mind for the teams they play against, and it still seems to happen for them. Jay, what's impressed you most about the dominance of the Hoosiers?
The fact that they number 2 scoring offense in the nation, 42.2 points per game. When you think about a team like that, but defensively, they've done really well. Like Greg just said, the creating turnovers. That's what your defense is all about. If you look at the Oregon game, the first play of the game, pick 6. Like that changes everything. And then you force another turnover backed up in Oregon's 5-yard line where the quarterback hits the running back with the ball. And all of a sudden now you get 14 easy points. You cannot give this team, you cannot spot them 14 points or any points at all. And if you look at their road to success right now, they've beaten every team by an average of 31.5 points per game in the playoffs. So we're not talking about cakewalks. They beat some solid football teams and everything. So when I think about overall, I call Cignetti, Greg, head coach of Indiana. What he's brought to this program and to this team is a standard. Like there is a standard, and you know it immediately when you see the players, how you interact. It doesn't matter what the score is. He's on the sideline taking notes. He's writing down things for the next series. He doesn't stop coaching until the end. And, of course, he's another coach off the Saban tree, right? So all these guys have come off the Saban tree, and they've done really well. But Indiana, to me, is a team that if you're going to beat Indiana, you got to play mistake-free football. And I think for Miami, if you think about overall, they have the type of team that plays great defense. Indiana's not a speed-up offense, so that gives guys like Bain and, those guys inside time to rest in between plays where they're not gasping for air because they're trying to get ran east and west with the quick passing game that Ole Miss just showed against them. So if you get those guys time to catch their breath, but Indiana is so good because they can run the football. It's not just dropping back and making passes. They are really well balanced offensively, throwing the ball and running the ball. That's what makes them unique. And they get a defense that create turnovers. They don't beat themselves. Miami's best shot in this ball game is you got to hit the plays when they're there, and you got to make sure you put pressure on Fernando. If you don't, it could be a long night.
Man, one of the most likable players in college football. Greg, I wanted to get your take on Curt Cignetti, which, yeah, names is not one of Jason Campbell's strengths. So part of my job as host of this show is just correcting his mispronunciation. And he affectionately called him Cugnetti one week, and it stuck. So forgive us for that. But you obviously go way back with Coach Cignetti. I'm curious, is he similar now as he was back when he was on staff in Tuscaloosa? And I heard you say during the broadcast, like, he let into me a couple times. Like, he's always been a disciplined guy, but do you see a difference in how he approaches coaching all these years later?
You know, it's a great question, because I don't know if he necessarily is different with how he approaches it. He's obviously very similar, but it's different because he was usually on the receiving end of Coach Saban's animosity. It's just strange to see it alter and shift, because with Kirby, who obviously coached for Coach Saban, like, Kirby was the golden child. Like, he could do no wrong. You know what I mean? Like Coach never got on him. He got on everybody else beneath Kirby. Like, Coach Saban did get on Coach McElroy, and McElroy was up in the booth, so it was different.
Sure.
But I mean, to see him now as the guy that's the enforcer was a little strange, I guess, at first. But he's done a great job. I mean, he really has. He's done a great job. And I don't think it's a huge surprise to any of us because of how detail-oriented he was and how buttoned up he was. It's not a huge surprise, but it's still relatively shocking to see someone that was at one point the subordinate in the room, or it was one of the subordinates in the room, like we all were, to now being the Saban of his own, of his own place. So it's a little different, but not surprising to see the success he's having.
Yeah, I gotta say, one of my favorite parts also, because at times the play was left a bit to be desired, not on the Indiana side, just the competitive nature. Him finding the cameras, Greg, I lost my mind. And the fact that y'all kept clipping it and he would just beam into it. Amazing.
Always.
Amazing.
I think, well, we were fortunate. We had a lot of cameras available. Yeah. And I mean, like, whatever direction he looked, we were going to find the stair. Like, he could have been looking dead up at the ceiling and it wouldn't have mattered, because we had a camera up there, like, planted on the roof. So yeah, we could have found him anywhere, but you're right. I mean, it's funny the way we were able to constantly find that stare, that anger, that intensity, that frustration, whatever it might've been on that given moment.
Phenomenal. Really painted the picture. I loved it. Well, obviously we've got one more game to wrap up the college football season. It feels like so much has happened, but it also feels like it went in the blink of an eye, like it does every year. But we're set up for another exciting matchup. Miami, Indiana. I mean, just a crazy story. I agree with you, Jay. If you had told us 5 years ago this is what the final matchup would be, or even what the field had been this year, I don't know that we would have believed you. It truly has shown a bit of a pendulum swing, but very excited for both of these programs. Miami's first title game appearance since 2003, and it just so happens to be at home. So obviously they get the comfort of playing on their home field. But Indiana fans have traveled very well. I mean, this truly feels like a potentially once-in-a-lifetime thing. I don't think so. I think they're not going anywhere. But so many of these fans obviously never anticipated seeing a situation like this. So they have traveled very well. I definitely expect they're all heading down to South Beach to celebrate this one. So it's going to be a great environment. You guys have highlighted both of these teams' strengths, what has made them so efficient through the playoff race as well. And you've got Carson Beck with so much experience. You've got Fernando Mendoza with so much heart and passion, and all the storylines that are present in both of these, from coaching to fan bases to players. It sets up for a really good one. I'm just going to tee it up to both of you. Takes on this game, maybe a couple keys that you expect to be prevalent storylines. Whoever wants to go first.
I think the biggest key is, can Miami kind of junk it up enough and make it nasty enough to kind of disrupt the rhythm and the effectiveness and the chemistry that Indiana's played with. I think that's the key. I mean, they need to just muddy the water. They need to drag them to the deep end and just make it as ugly and as unwatchable a game as humanly possible. Like, that to me is the ticket. And I think they can do it. I think it's tough. Like, they're going to force They need to force Indiana to play on their terms. And if they can, then that might be able to junk up the RPO just enough to make it very difficult. I think it's going to be really tough for Miami to do that because Indiana is very capable of winning a rugged ball game as well. But I think the style of play, Indiana wants to kind of create matchups on the outside. And I think it's really going to come down to whether or not they can block them. If they can block them, then they'll be in good shape. If they can't block them, then it becomes a real interesting part. And then the other side, can they put pressure on Carson Beck and stop the run at the same time? They have not really played against a team that's been on schedule or been in position to go into attack mode and create balance on their own. Bama was playing from behind. You also look at Oregon, they were playing from behind. So any team that is kind of going right at them without having to play catch up, then I think that maybe it can get a little more interesting. So I do think Miami's offensive line needs to be the most important part of this game. Like, we'll talk about the receivers, we'll talk about the quarterback. The O-line to me is the tone setter. They have to play well. If they could play well, I think Miami's got a real chance. It'll be tough, but it can be done for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything Greg just said. I say this: Miami's defense, number 5 scoring defense in football, right? And then you think about they've only given up 14 points per game on average. So you think about Ruben Bain, you think about Akeem Mesidor, you think about Keontae Scott. I named those 3 guys because Bain is going to get some attention on the outside of the edges, right? So you have to know where he's at all times. Ole Miss did a great job of neutralizing him. But when you think about Mesidor, is he healthy? He got hurt in that game, got banged up a little bit against Ole Miss. Is he back fully healthy? Is their defense back healthy at all? They missed both of their corners in the crucial part of the ball game against Ole Miss. Are those guys back? Because you got to have everybody at Arsenal when you get ready to play against this type of football team. And overall, you think about offensively, you do have to muddy it up. Fletcher is going to be a big part of what Miami does in this ball game. Yeah. But Malachi Toney, to me, is still the X factor because you have to know where he's lined up at. You utilize him in the reverse game. You utilize him in those quick hitters, those bootlegs. Also, he can challenge you down the field with his speed. Is he a type of guy that can continue that at home in a hostile environment? And I think that the answer is yes. Then you look at the other receivers. C.J. Daniels has to show up and play really great in this game because attention is going to be paid to Malachi Toney, which is going to create one-on-one matchups, which he did an exceptional job in the Ole Miss game of getting open on a crucial third down. He ran a 9-yard stop route. He ran it right the right distance, made a challenging catch. So he showed up for them in the playoffs. But Miami has been tested. They have been tested. They went to A&M. No one gave them a shot. Hostile environment. They win. Against a really good head coach. They beat Ole Miss. Ohio State the next game. Beat Ohio State the next game. Everyone had Ohio State written to go to the championship, right? Mm-hmm. And then you just beat an high-scoring offense in Ole Miss playing with a chip on their shoulder. So they have been challenged through these playoffs, and they've been on a great run. It's going to take a Miami team that has to look like the New York Giants when they beat the Super Bowl Patriots when they was undefeated. I think that was back in 2007, where their defense got after Tom Brady, and they held them well below their score in that year. And you talk about a team that had a phenomenal quarterback, but they put pressure and they created a pocket. You can't let Fernando Mendez sit back there and go through his Mendoza, my bad. Sit back there. You go. Yeah. Sit back there and go through his I talked to a lot of people at his transfer portal.
You good. It was close.
Progressions and not feel the pressure. He has got to feel pressure in that ball game where he got to make his feet unhappy. If they make his feet unhappy and they neutralize them and make them one-dimensional, then Miami has a shot in this ball game. But to me, the X factor on offense, on defense, Keontae Scott, that's that star position. On offense, of course, Malachi Toney. But we'll see. I can't wait. It's gonna be a good one.
There's really star power on both sides, which I think is going to make it really fun. And guys, obviously, Fernando Mendoza being the most highlighted, this is his hometown as well. I don't think people are putting that together as much as Miami having a home game. He returns to his hometown, and I know how much growing up down there meant to him. I've covered him at times, and he speaks very highly about growing up down there, and that's really where his love for football began. And obviously, that's going to be a special one for him and his family. But yeah, I agree with you guys. Mark Fletcher has rushed for 395 yards in their 3 playoff games. We know what Malachi Toney is. You both have pointed out to the offensive line play, and obviously I think the trenches are going to be a huge piece of this thing, given what both of these quarterbacks respectfully can do. Indiana's offensive line has only allowed 11 pressures in their 2 postseason games, and I agree with you, Jason. I think that the test that Miami has had through this playoff race, I would argue, are more impressive and preparative than what Indiana has been dominant, don't get me wrong, but we all did have some questions about Alabama heading into the playoff game. And meanwhile, you felt really good. At least one of Texas A&M, Ohio State, or Ole Miss, you felt like we're going to be a really, potentially lopsided matchup. And they have just found a way to win. They keep digging deep and finding a way to win. And so many times those are the ones that actually gut check a game like this. But Indiana is on the cusp of being the first ever 16-0 team in the modern era of major college football. All the storylines prevalent. It does feel like they're just one game away from that magic season, and they just have the guys and the coach to do it. So I believe our friends at FanDuel have this one as an 8.5. I believe so. Yes. Indiana by 8.5 and the over under at 48.5. But again, with Miami having some home field advantage, that one could move as we get closer to Monday. So very excited about this one. Very excited to close out an impressive year of college football. Miami defeating Ole Miss, our last SEC team in the field. So we're going to start with them as we put a bow on Ole Miss's historic season. Not immune to some drama and controversy, but they still found themselves in a Final Four, ultimately losing to Miami down at the very end, a rushing game-winning touchdown from Carson Beck with 18 seconds left. But Ole Miss continued to show what has made them so entertaining and so successful so far this year. They actually averaged 6.6 yards per play to Miami's 5.2 yards per play, but they ran 28 fewer plays than Miami. They had 0 turnovers, but were just 2 for 10 on third down. And of course, the Kejuan Lacey hamstring injury was a huge storyline of the entirety of the game. But I think with Miami heading into a national championship game as a team that was essentially the last one in and had some debate surrounding even their entrance into the college football playoff. There's plenty to kind of hang your hat on if you're this Miami team. But for Ole Miss to have dealt with everything they dealt with, Pete Golding taking the helm, who the heck is coaching on the sidelines, or are they headed to Baton Rouge? You name it, this team had to deal with it. You saw them firsthand. What ultimately do you think people need to remember most when they think about this Ole Miss team?
Well, I think it's interesting in a lot of ways. In a lot of the same reasons why Indiana's been successful, that's kind of been Ole Miss. Now, they have some star players for sure. I mean, Kejuan Lacey's a star player. Trinidad Chambliss became a star player. But if you look at last year's Ole Miss, 2024, that is, like that was the all-star team. That was the team that was supposed to break through and to make the playoff. And that was the team that everyone had said, oh, man, they get in, look out. I mean, and yet they continued to get in their own way and lost 3 games in the regular season that they had no business losing. The best example being losing at home to a team in Kentucky that finished, I think, 4-8.
Yep.
So they were kind of in a weird way, a little bit like this year's version of Indiana. Like people don't think we can do it this year. Look how many guys we lost. We lost this. We don't have that. We have new secondary pieces. We're thinner along the D line. More quarterbacks less experienced. And yet here they are. They find themselves 1 win away from getting to the national championship. And with 2 minutes to play, it looked like they were going. So I think there's a lot to like about how that team was put together. I also think that Lane Kiffin leaving in many ways was beneficial for them as far as just the galvanizing effect that can have and how they kind of had an us against the world mentality after that. And, Lane left because he didn't think he'd win a national championship here. Whether that was true or not is beside the point. That's what they believed. Sure. And that's what they kind of used as fuel to put themselves in a really good position to make a run. The other thing I'll say too is it's really more about matchups in the postseason than anything. I mean, we see this in the NFL, and Jason can speak to this. And I think we talk a lot about the players and the teams and all this. And this team has this many players and this many pros and all that stuff. But in reality, like Ole Miss is a very difficult matchup for Georgia, right? And it doesn't make Georgia any less awesome. They're great. But Georgia doesn't match up as well against a team in Ole Miss that has a quarterback that can create and buy time and run around and and manufacture big plays and wants to play with tempo and will get the ball out to neutralize the pass rush. And then defensively, they're opportunistic and they're pretty good up front, maybe not as good in the back end.
Sure.
But Georgia's not really a throw-first football team to begin with. So I think that they're just a good matchup for them. Same can be said with Ohio State and Miami. I know we're diverting off the Ole Miss conversation for a half second, but like Ohio State is really good against teams that they're more physical than. But no one's more physical than Miami. But if Miami played against Ole Miss, as we saw, not a great matchup for Miami. They found a way, not a great matchup for them. So I think a lot of this is about matchups and timing and right place, right time. Who's better on third down that day? Who converts in the red zone that day? But maybe not necessarily always the best team, but the team that executes better on that one day. So it's been fun. But Ole Miss, I think they should probably come out of the season feeling very proud about what they accomplished, but disappointed that they couldn't get off the field there with the game on the line, with the ticket to the national championship and the balance.
Oh, college football. Who would have thought 5 years ago that we'll be here? I think the whole Lane Kiffin situation, a part of me as a competitor is why not stay at Ole Miss and do something that's never been done before? Get a statue built of yourself outside. And I do think with Lane Kiffin, had he stayed there, I agree with you, Greg and Taylor. I do think a lot of the momentum carried over from him not being there that gave those guys a little bit of extra to want to play for. I do think if you have Lane Kiffin on the sideline, he's able to help make adjustments quicker. And when you don't have your full staff at hand and you're trying to compete against a team like Miami, that has everybody at hand, that can make a difference between winning by 3 points and losing by 3 points. And I think those are the big things that came out of it. But you think about the SEC as a whole this year. I've heard Ryan Clark, who's a former SEC player himself, who played at LSU, speak about the SEC not being as strong as it used to be. Do you think that's a correct statement, or do you challenge that a little bit?
I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because my big thing with the SEC, I mean, there's still dudes on every team. I think there's something to be said about the depth of the league. And you can look at the bowl record. Like, I don't care. I never have. Okay. Like, I didn't ever use the bowls as a, I mean, you can go back and look at any comments. I've been on the air a billion hours since I got in this world in 2014. Like, I never sat there and thought, oh man, look at the SEC's bowl record, guys, best league. Like, no, like that's an absurd take. Right. Especially with where things have gone with bowls. To me, it's always about who has the most players. Like, where are the most talented players and where do they play? And the SEC still has the best players. And the best indicator of that is what happens on the NFL draft. Like, there is no bias in the NFL draft. Like, all those teams just want to win. And the SEC has the most players. And you can look at a team like South Carolina, who finishes the year, 4-8. And just look at how many guys on their team will play professional football. There's a lot, including Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart, who might very well find themselves coming off the board in the top 10 of next year's NFL draft. You look at a team like Mississippi State, not a great year by any stretch of the imagination, but they have a receiver that everybody wants in the NFL. Like, no matter what. You look at Florida this year, very disappointing season, right? Very, very disappointing. Not the year you wanted. Look at that roster. I mean, they're going to have a lot of guys that will play professionally. So I think when you look at the bottom of the league, that's what makes the SEC different to me. I mean, how many times did South Carolina have a team on the ropes this year that they had no business playing against at that level? They had Alabama on the ropes. They had Texas A&M on the ropes. They had a bunch of teams. Look at Florida. Florida beats Texas. Florida has Georgia on the ropes. Florida turns it over 5 times. It's still a 1-possession game against LSU, early in the season. So I think that the SEC is still an elite league because they have elite players. Every single roster has elite players. They might not have 20, but there are NFL dudes on every team. And if you look at other leagues, that's not the case. With all due respect to some of the teams at the bottom of the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the ACC, there's not dudes on some of those rosters. They're good coaches in some cases. There's great coaches in many cases. But as far as players, mano-a-mano, they're not the same caliber of athlete that you'll see throughout most of the Southeastern Conference teams. So I disagree with Ryan Clark. Now you can't stockpile talent the way you once did.
Yeah.
The 2s and the 3s and the depth on SEC teams is not what it once was, but that's because the talent is just being spread a little bit more wide than it is stacked like it was, I don't know, when you and I were playing, Jason.
That's what I agree with, is the fact that since NIL started, they say the SEC team has not won a national championship, right? So it's like you said, the depth of the league always was the pivotal for this conference.
Well, that's not entirely true. The first 2 years of NIL, Georgia won the national championship in 21 and 22. So, but that was still a little bit like grandfathered in, you know what I mean? Then I think that Georgia's success, the SEC's dominance for the better part of the decade and a half and change since what, 2005, 2006 to 2021, how many SEC teams won a title? I mean, it was absurd, right? I think then the Big Ten's like, enough of this. Like, let's get our big money boosters involved. There's no rules. Go and spend. And they've been able to do that. And it's worked out well because they've, in many cases, had the best roster. You can make a case that they had one of the best rosters this year in Ohio State. Penn State even had one of the best rosters. Didn't work out. But they've gone all in. Michigan, of course, won the national championship a couple of years ago. Indiana's the unique case where maybe they don't have the deepest pockets, but they're deep enough to go out and get quality players.
Well, they got Cuban, you know. He's
incentivized because Mark is a savvy businessman. He also is a great marketer. Cuban wasn't walking around Bloomington last year when they were 6-1. Cuban's now going to semifinal games and Rose Bowl games, but he's smart. He's tailing off this, and yes, while generous, I think he now is incentivized to get more involved.
There's return on his investment at this point. There may not have been prior to that, but I do want to put a bow on Ole Miss for all of our Ole Miss listeners. And I agree with you, Greg. I think that so much good should be taken from this year. So much pride should exist for the players that were a part of this team. Now, unfortunate news was that Trinidad Chambliss's waiver to the NCAA for an extra year of eligibility was denied. That has come out since our last podcast when we were speculating what the future is going to look like for Ole Miss. And pretty quickly after that, the news came down that former Auburn backup Deuce Knight is headed to Oxford to begin his playing days in Ole Miss. So I just wanted to get both of your takes. Obviously, Jason has a lot of familiarity with Deuce, and you both understand the turnover and continuing after a successful season. Sometimes staying at the top is harder than getting to the top. But under Pete Golding, with everything that was garnered after a season like this, where do each of you see this program heading?
Jason, you go first, buddy. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, a lot of what they did offensively. Think about it. This offense was built for Austin Simmons, right? So then they went out, they found Trinidad Chambliss, and they brought him in there to be a quality backup. But then all of a sudden, Lane talked about in preseason that, hey, I do have a backup that if he ever gets the shot to play, like, the kid is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And everyone saw what happened when Trinidad got in there. He played so well that Austin Simmons couldn't get his job back, right? So when you think about it as a quarterback perspective, great offensive minds tailor the offense to what their quarterback does best. Most offenses, if you look at the National Football League and you look across, when you see struggling offenses, are they trying to tailor to what the quarterback does better, or are they trying to fit the quarterback into their system? There's a difference. And I think for Trinidad Chambliss, he came into the right situation, the right time, with the right staff. They knew how to utilize his ability and his talents to help him get to the next step in his ball game. So it wasn't like he had to relearn everything. They just took what he did well and implemented it into their system. And that's why Trinidad Chambliss was able to have so much success. Now, if he's not able to come back, yes, that's a big loss for Ole Miss. It's already a big loss that you don't have Charlie Weiss, you don't have Lane Kiffin there. That's part of your offensive minds that everyone saw in the playoffs. That's not their offense for next year. They're going to have a new coordinator, a new quarterback coach. And now you have to decide, okay, if Chambliss is not there, probably part of the reason Deuce Knight went there is to see immediate opportunity to be a starter. and to go there and play. And he's from Mississippi. So it kind of made a little bit of sense for him to say, hey, I want to go back and compete back at home, but I'm pretty much walking into a starting role if Trinidad is not coming there. So from that perspective, Deuce loved Auburn. I think that was a big reason why he left. Auburn brought in transfer Byron Brown, the big-time transfer out of USF to come in with Coach Goldie's offense. So you think about that, that's another marriage that's been together for 3 years. And if Coach Goldie's wanted to hit the ground running quickly at Auburn, you need to have a signal caller that knows your system and you're not relearning. You're just trying to get used to your surroundings and get used to the SEC. So there's a lot of things that's going to change. I do think Pete Golden, he's a defensive mind. So for him, the portal is going to be super important because you see all the guys that started leaving already that was part of that offensive line, part of that offense and everything. So how much are they going to be starting over is going to be a key for me for next year. And the SEC as a whole, most teams have lost 20 plus players on a lot of these teams.
It's crazy.
So it's the new reality in college sports. It's not anything in one school. It's just where we're at in college sports, where every year is a revolving door and you got to recruit and you got to retain and you got to go in the portal and get your needs. And that's where we are today.
You know, I think the big thing with move of Deuce to Ole Miss is that's a real tried and true system that is really easy on the quarterback. I mean, relatively speaking, like it's like, all right, boundary hitch. If he's off, take it. If he's tight, throw a back shoulder or run the ball. I mean, it's a very simple offense with simple rules. It really kind of accentuates athleticism. Like you're encouraged to be mobile. You want to win with offense, so you're empowered. I think there's a lot to like about playing in a system like that, and it makes some sense. And while I think they've also kind of figured out, hey, having a great running back is really valuable. You know, we're not going to put too much on a guy's shoulders like we did with Jackson Dart. Let's go get a Keywan Lacey. Let's go out and get a guy that we can really feed and feature in the run game. And if he needs 250 carries, he can get 250 carries in a game like this and score a bunch of touchdowns. And when the field gets tight, you know, we can hand it off as opposed to relying so heavily on the quarterback run game like they did with Jackson. So I think this is an offense that's evolved. I also think it's a very attractive offense to be in and one that I think guys want to play in. But I also think, too, it's an offense that kind of translates. We've seen Trinidad Chambliss's stock rise. Yeah. We've seen Jackson Dart end up in the first round. Should he have or shouldn't he have is up for a different debate. But I think there's a lot to like about playing in that style. There are other offenses that are also attractive, if you will, but there's negative recruiting about those offenses. Well, you stockpile yards in that offense. Yeah. That's an offense that doesn't translate. And we won't need to go into the rules there, but we all know the offenses that people have questions about. NFL scouts have questions about. So the Ole Miss is not an offense that has that right now. They've done a pretty good job of getting guys prepared, and it's understandable why a guy with NFL aspirations would give them a good long look.
That's a very fair point. I'll be very interested to see how all of that transpires, obviously, with Deuce Knight's name having been as popular as it has been around Auburn. So it'll be interesting to see what's next for him. Greg, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, and we kind of touched on it a little bit with the Lane Kiffin saga, which, quite frankly, I am sick and tired of talking of. It has taken up far too much of this show. So I'm going to make it a bit more broad. Obviously, as we head into the 2026 season, 6 of the 14 SEC programs are going to have different head coaches than they did heading into 2025. We've had a sneak peek at one of them being Pete Golding, but I'll kind of just leave that open as someone who deals so closely with all of these coaches and with the league in general. Any in particular that you're really excited to see what they do as we head into 2026?
Oh man, there's so many. Pete Golding's whole situation has been pretty remarkable. It'd be hard to push back on that. Totally. And the momentum that was created, I think the galvanizing effect that it's had on their fundraising. I just think there's a belief, there's an energy around that place that's fascinating. Summerall, I'm fascinated to see what happens with him at Florida. Obviously some new pieces there, but I love both coordinator hires. If I'm going to go kind of like off the grid, the Kentucky situation with Will Stein's a really intriguing one as well. They got a nice, solid quarterback addition in Kenny Minchie. So I like that fit. I also like some of the guys they've brought into the portal. I mean, they're winning some battles on the recruiting trail. that they wouldn't normally win, I don't feel like. So I think that there's some momentum that's been created there as well. They're no longer satisfied kind of being, a fly in the ointment, so to speak. I think they're wanting to be a player, which I very much applaud them for trying to get in that world. Because it can be done. Like if Indiana's proven it can be done. What's that dissimilar between Kentucky historically and Indiana? Frankly, Kentucky's got way more skins on the wall traditionally than what Indiana has. But the priorities prior to the last few years have always been hoops. And now it's been proven that they can coexist. And if anything, they can help each other. So I think it's great what he's doing. And it feels like they've had a great offseason as well.
I agree. It hasn't been as splashy and glitzy and getting all the highlight. He's just kind of subtly been real steady and active since getting hired. I like that one a lot. I mean, Jason and I have talked ad nauseum about all of this, and I think a lot of them are actually great fits. And I think for what all transpired this past year and the chaos that ensued, when all the chips kind of fell, it did kind of seem like, okay, I'm not like gobsmacked by any of them. So I'm really looking forward to this season ahead and what they all are respectfully going to do. And I also would be remiss, Greg, if we don't ask you about this, and I'll get Jason's take on this as well. But I know Alabama fans are, of course, going to come for my neck if I don't ask you this. Obviously, with the news about Ty Simpson intending to declare for the NFL draft and begin his professional career, we saw a little bit of Austin Mack, and not entirely sure what that offseason will look like from a personnel perspective for the Tide. But, so much good to be taken from this past year and a little bit of disappointment to be taken from this past year. As someone who fully understands that culture, has lived it, has breathed it, where do you see the Tide headed into 2026?
Well, it's going to be a totally different team, a lot of young pieces, probably going to be a lot younger team across the board. Of course, with the portal still open, it's anybody's guess as to who else will be in the mix. But they liked a lot of their young players. I think they like a lot of the recruits that they've brought in the last two classes. So if they got to go young, they go young. That is what it is. The schedule is very tough, as always. It's not any easier today than it was yesterday or the day before that. So it'll be a hard schedule. But if there's one thing that I think everyone can take from this past year is that, one, this roster was flawed. And I know you can tell me about the blue chip ratio and the stars and all this other stuff and the lack of development, all that other nonsense. The reality is there's not as many high caliber players on the roster this past year as there have been in years past. The depth is not what it once was 10 years ago, of course. So it's been, I think, a bit of a struggle. But if you look at the games and the possessions that were stolen by Kalen DeBoer and the staff, the amount of fourth down conversions, the timely plays made by the defense that were either pick sixes or big turnovers or whatever that may be, there was a lot to take away from this season that were real positive. They won some games that they probably shouldn't have won. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they lost a couple games that maybe they shouldn't have lost.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma game probably being the best example of that. So I think there's a lot to learn. I think there's a lot to take away. I also think that there's a lot of positivity that's been created. I know people are always frustrated with how things finished up, but you run into a buzzsaw, and very few teams have played Indiana better than you have. Right. So at least for a half, you know what I mean? Like, it was ugly in the second half. It was awful in the second half.
Yeah.
The first half, it was more competitive than it was in some other spots. So, I think there's a lot to take away. And look, people want perfection. You're not going to get it. Not in this era. It just doesn't happen. Not in the SEC. The teams are too good and too talented, and there's too many difficult environments to play in. So, I'm still a full believer and an endorser of Kalen DeBoer and everything he's doing and the players that are on the roster. I think they can do a lot of special things. Winning a national championship next year is going to be tough because there's so many new pieces.
No kidding. Jay, your take.
Yeah, I say Ty Simpson. Everyone wants to, chime in and say he may come back just because the money that's been offered to him. Greg, we missed that opportunity to make NFL salaries in college, right?
No kidding.
But I think he's head bent on going pro. I've heard him come out and say some things that, hey, Alabama's the only school he wanted to play for, and he wants to leave it that way. So it goes to show you that he has a commitment there that that's not really trending in college football right now. Mm-hmm. And whether he's one of those last breeds of those type of players, we'll see as the future continues to unfold. But I say Alabama as a whole this year, like I said, there's a lot of expectations anytime that you're there. To follow up Coach Saban, no other coach really wanted that job because they knew the accolades and the what you're gonna have to do if you didn't live up to your predecessor. And like I said, so what he's had to endure has been tough. But I would say overall, I would say Alabama, depending on what they do in the portal, depending on how many guys they've lost, a lot of key guys. Quayshaw and Smith up front, 2 starters. But overall, this is always going to still be a team that's going to be competing in the SEC, and their name going to be right in it at the end of the day. So
Agreed.
I expect 2026 for everybody to figure out what their roster is going to look like at the end of this month, and then we'll see next year after spring ball. The best thing to happen in college football right now is you can't transfer out the spring. So once coaches set their roster in the spring, they got their first starters and they got their backups. So they know what they're getting themselves into come fall.
Right. Oh, man, it truly never sleeps. Well, Greg McElroy, thank you so much for joining us, providing your expertise. Congratulations on another amazing season. You and Sean are such a fantastic listen. I love watching games that y'all call. So congrats on all the success. We appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome back here anytime.
No, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to visit with y'all.
Yeah, appreciate the time, Greg. Sorry my internet went out because somebody decided to work in the neighborhood on the internet while we was on the show.
We were just going to let that be TV magic.
Just changed,
All right, y'all be good. Appreciate y'all.
It didn't happen.
All right, Greg, see you.
All right,
Thanks, everybody. We will be back next week on SEC State of Mind, presented by FanDuel. So make sure you tune in. Until then, enjoy the Natty. We'll talk soon.
Peace.